Raymond Keller was just wiping chalk dust off a Harvard floor when a white professor sneered, "This is beyond you." But by noon, Raymond had solved the same equation that left an entire class speechless. The professor erased the proof before anyone could see it. Except one student caught everything on camera. What happened next shattered Ivy League silence forever. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The linoleum floors of the Jefferson Engineering Hall gleamed under Raymond Keller's steady hand. It was 5:42 a.m., and the winter air outside hadn't yet touched the marble vestibule. But inside, the building was already alive, buzzing with the whispers of academia and hierarchy. Harvard's walls didn't echo the voices of the invisible. They absorbed them. Raymond, clad in his Navy janitorial uniform, moved silently from one end of the corridor to the other, his mop trailing behind him like a forgotten signature. The bucket wobbled with each push, sloshing a swirl of pine-scented water. The halls, lined with accolades, awards, and portraits of pale-faced founders, offered no reflection of the man mopping them. At 58, Raymond's hands were still strong but stiff, from years of repetition. His knees cracked with each bend. His back reminded him daily of the weight he had carried, not just janitorial carts, but a burden far less visible, and far heavier, the burden of being underestimated, dismissed. Especially in a place like this. He didn't mind cleaning. He minded being ignored. Room 214. Advanced mechanics was his favorite stop. Not because he understood what went on behind its closed doors, but because the room always smelled faintly of chalk and challenge. The whiteboard was usually dense with equations, unfinished thoughts, and half-solved problems. To the students, it was stress. To Raymond, it was serenity. He entered the room to find the board, pristine, wiped clean, as if waiting for something historic. He began emptying the bins, recycling, compost, then trash, until a scrawl of fresh chalk caught his eye. It hadn't been there the day before. A new problem now loomed across the board, written in tight, angry strokes. Not a word, just numbers, variables, a mechanic's riddle. At first he tried to ignore it, but something in the equation was familiar. Not the content, the rhythm. The problem, dense with complex integrals and kinematic notations, wasn't just written to teach, it was written to challenge. No, not challenge, humiliate. The handwriting was precise but cold, aggressive. Whoever had written it wanted someone to fail. And suddenly, he knew who it was. Professor Carl Aldrich. Raymond had overheard the man just 2 days ago, mocking a student's inability to understand a gyroscopic precession problem. "If they can't figure it out, they shouldn't be here," he had said in passing, not caring who heard. Carl Aldrich represented the kind of intellect that weaponized knowledge, not shared it. He wielded academia like a sword, and used race as the sheath. Over the past 3 years, Raymond had cleaned Aldrich's office dozens of times, and every time the professor had acted as though Raymond's presence contaminated the very idea of Harvard. No eye contact, no acknowledgement, not even a nod. But Raymond remembered everything, including the time last spring, when he caught a glimpse of Aldrich's notebook, and instantly recognized the flaw in a miscalculated torque ratio. He'd said nothing, of course, just cleaned the spill, and moved on. That morning, standing alone in the echo of that prestigious room, Raymond couldn't look away from the board. The coffee cup in his hand trembled slightly, not from fear, from restraint. Because the truth was, Raymond understood every single mark on that board. He hadn't always been a janitor. Years ago, before mop handles and minimum wage, Raymond had walked different halls. MIT halls. He'd once been a mechanical engineering prodigy, a scholarship student with perfect scores and a gift for seeing through problems like glass. But that was another lifetime. One mistake, one racially charged accusation, had shattered everything. A white classmate had stolen and submitted Raymond's fluid dynamics thesis chapter as his own. When Raymond fought back, he was labeled disruptive, unprofessional, and worse, threatening. The system didn't ask for the truth. It asked for quiet, and Raymond had been quiet ever since. He reached for the whiteboard marker, then stopped. His reflection in the glossy board stared back at him. Not a student, not a genius. A janitor, wrinkled uniform, faded name tag, brown skin. He looked around. Empty room, silence. The problem wasn't just challenging. It was intentionally cruel. Its structure was twisted, deliberately unsolvable, without a niche grasp of moment, of inertia variations, under non-standard torque applications. It was the kind of problem Aldridge would put on the board, just to watch graduate students flounder. And yet Raymond's mind lit up like an old engine warming to life. Each variable teased him. Each constraint invited him back to a place he hadn't allowed himself to visit in years. The first line of the solution formed in his head, unbidden. If t equals I times alpha, and the axis isn't fixed, then… No! He shook it off. Not his place. Not his problem. He wasn't a part of this world anymore. He returned to cleaning, sweeping crumbs from under the front desk. But the numbers danced behind his eyelids. It's unsolvable, unless you rotate the reference frame. He gritted his teeth. He dumped the trash into the bag, tied it off, walked toward the next room. But as he passed the board again, the chalk squeaked, barely audible. His fingers had moved before his brain did. One variable. Just one. He stared. It was like riding a bike after 20 years, and realizing your legs still remembered. The chalk hovered again. He added a denominator, just to see if it balanced. It did. He stepped back. The problem meant to be a weapon was unraveling itself to him, line by line. He exhaled, long and low. No. He wasn't going to solve this. He couldn't. But he also couldn't unsee it now. He turned toward the door, but then he noticed something strange. In the far corner, a subtle reflection. A phone lens. Someone was watching. A girl, maybe 19, mixed race, sitting on the floor just out of direct view, holding a coffee cup with trembling hands. Her eyes met his, and widened. She had seen it. But before Raymond could speak, before he could tell her not to say anything, she stood and walked away fast, leaving behind only the echo of truth. Raymond turned back to the board one last time. He hadn't solved it yet, but he would. Not to prove Aldridge wrong, to prove he was still who he used to be. Even if nobody ever knew. As he emptied the last bin, his eyes returned to the chalkboard. His hand twitched. Something inside him refused to stay buried. The problem was calling him. And he was about to answer. The fluorescent lights in room 2014 buzzed softly, casting a sterile glow over the whiteboard that had now become a silent battlefield. The air inside was colder than the rest of the building, as though the equations on the board had drained the warmth out of the room. Raymond stood frozen beneath the numbers, each line of chalk pulling at threads of his path. Outside, Harvard marched on in its usual rhythm, heels clacking, laptops humming, coffee brewing. But within these four walls, something was shifting. Raymond wasn't just looking at a math problem. He was staring down a provocation. Earlier that day, the moment had unfolded like a scene from a script written to mock dignity. It began when Raymond had paused, just outside the staff lounge, waiting for the floor to dry. Two adjunct instructors were deep in conversation, and one of them, Emerson, a younger black professor from applied physics, mentioned an upcoming student project involving dynamic friction variables on inclined systems. He sounded enthusiastic, energized by the students' curiosity. Raymond, not intending to eavesdrop, but unable to resist, casually added from the doorway, "If they're factoring for belt slippage, they'll need to compensate for torque loss at the shaft. Otherwise, the data'll skew under constant load." Dr. Emerson blinked, surprised not in offense, but in recognition. "You studied mechanical engineering." Raymond smiled faintly. Modest. A long time ago, before Harvard. But before Emerson could respond, Carl Aldridge appeared from around the corner, holding a steaming mug and wearing his signature smirk. His eyes narrowed as he surveyed the interaction. He gave no greeting, no nod, just a flat Arctic silence that cracked only when he muttered, "Well, I suppose theoretical friction can be simplified, once you remove academic rigor." His voice didn't rise, but the insult was as sharp as a blade. Emerson, uneasy, cleared his throat and walked off, leaving Raymond standing alone in Aldridge's quiet disdain. Then came the sentence that would echo for hours. Aldridge leaned in slightly, as though offering sage advice, and said, "This is beyond you, not that conversation. This place, this field, this board, beyond you." Raymond didn't flinch. He just gave the professor a long, unreadable look before walking away. But that night, long after the students had left and the building had emptied, he returned. He stood in room 214 again, the silence now his only witness. The whiteboard gleamed, now filled with the problem Aldridge had scribbled after the lounge incident. It spanned nearly the entire surface. Stretching corner to corner, there was no attribution, no explanation, just pure academic aggression. Raymond approached it slowly, like it was a relic or a bomb. The problem wasn't just difficult. It was borderline cruel. At first glance, it appeared to involve the rotational inertia of a composite body under asymmetric loading. But the deeper you dove, the more twisted it became. Nested constraints, multi-axis rotations, coefficient inversions designed to trick even the brightest doctoral candidates. This wasn't an instructional problem. It was a trap, a dare, and Raymond knew, without a sliver of doubt, that it had been left for him. This was no coincidence. Aldridge had written it with purpose. Because Raymond had made the mistake of knowing something, of speaking like he belonged, of demonstrating an understanding that no janitor should have had. It wasn't about friction. It was about territory. Aldridge had seen Raymond as an intruder, stepping into sacred academic ground, and like every gatekeeper before him, he'd responded with erasure, ridicule, and performance. The math on the board was his performance. Raymond stepped closer. He didn't pick up the chalk yet. Instead, he studied the rhythm of the layout, how the variables bent around each other, how the nested functions pulsed like hidden veins. It was like watching a machine tick. A cruel machine, but a beautiful one nonetheless. His eyes moved with muscle memory, dissecting each piece like an old mechanic inspecting a rusted engine. Torque imbalance, rotational shift, frictional lag on sloped trajectory. It was bad math. Not incorrect, just showy. Flash over substance. The kind of math meant to impress administrators and scare undergrads. And as Raymond stared, something stirred in him. Not just his old self, the student he'd been, but something more dangerous. Pride. Not arrogance. Not ego. But the fierce, wounded pride of a man who'd been buried for decades under the weight of other people's assumptions. He felt his jaw tighten. He knew what Aldridge had done. He had turned his back, gone home, and left this mathematical snare waiting, hoping the janitor would see it, engage it, fail it. And that thought almost made Raymond laugh. Because what Aldridge didn't know, what no one here knew, was that the last time Raymond had solved a problem like this, he'd been 19, and the paper had landed him a position on an MIT-funded propulsion prototype team. That was before the betrayal, before the system swallowed his credentials and spat him out without ceremony or apology. He hadn't touched problems like this in years. But as he stood there, he realized something shocking. He missed this. He missed the silence of calculus, the smell of chalk, the way a board could become a battleground of ideas, stripped of everything but logic and ingenuity. But Aldridge hadn't written this out of love for mechanics. He had written it as a message, a racial one, a class one. Stay in your place. Raymond let the chalk hover near his hand, but didn't touch it, not yet. He wanted to see if the whispers in the math would speak louder. And then suddenly there was movement behind him. A faint sound. He turned, heart stuttering slightly. No one there. Only the dim hallway light casting shadows on the doorway glass. He shook his head. He was alone. But he could feel the weight of that board pressing against him, daring him to engage, to reclaim what had been stolen. Raymond exhaled. Then, from the hallway, a subtle, unmistakable sound. A voice. Not loud. Soft. Unintentional. I knew it. He turned quickly, startled. Standing in the hallway, just out of view from the doorway, was the same girl from earlier, Naomi Sutter. She had returned. She had followed him. And now, she'd seen too much. Raymond stared at her, alarmed. Her expression was stunned, but not mocking. She wasn't smiling. She looked off. Why are you here? He asked, voice rough. I saw you earlier. You almost solved it. Raymond didn't reply. Naomi stepped forward slightly, holding up her phone. The screen glowed with a paused video. Grainy. From a stairwell angle. She had recorded him. I didn't mean to spy, she added quickly. But what you did, what I saw, it was real, right? He said nothing. I know Aldridge's work. I'm in his class. That problem's been sitting in his drawer for years. He always says it's unsolvable. Said if anyone solved it, he'd retire. I've never seen him actually put it on the board. Raymond's eyes narrowed. He left it for you, didn't he? The silence between them felt heavier than anything written on that board. Raymond turned back to the whiteboard. Yes, he said softly. He did. Naomi looked at him. the realization dawning like a sunrise she hadn't expected. Then solve it, she whispered. Do it tonight. And Raymond, eyes still locked on the chalkboard, reached for the chalk with steady hands, just as the door creaked open behind them. The chalk trembled slightly in Raymond's fingers, not from nerves, but memory. Holding it again was like touching the edge of a world he once belonged to, a world that had discarded him, closed its gates, and told him he didn't belong. Now here he was, in room 214 at Harvard, drawing an invisible line on a whiteboard like a man carving open a grave. It wasn't just a piece of chalk. It was the key to a coffin he'd buried years ago, one that contained a younger, brilliant version of himself. That ghost began to rise. The smell of chalk dust and winter disinfectant mingled in the air. But Raymond's mind had already drifted miles away, to a drafting table in Building 33, at MIT, where ambition once outweighed bitterness, and equations weren't proof of belonging, but joy. That was before the betrayal, before the lie that shattered his path. He'd been 19, bright, driven, the kind of student admissions counselors bragged about. Full scholarship, accelerated track, black excellence distilled into formulas and flight paths. Raymond was designing torque-regulated clutch systems for micropropulsion experiments, sitting side by side with doctoral candidates who'd spent years trying to grasp what came to him in moments. His professor then, Dr. Leona Price, had once told him during office hours, "You don't calculate, Raymond. You see?" And it was true. The numbers unfolded in his head, like blueprints, each variable a moving part, each constraint a contour to shape around. But talent wasn't enough. Not in a world where brilliance and skin color entered the room together, but didn't leave with the same weight. The betrayal came during his junior year, subtle, but devastating. A classmate, Chase Holloway, white, son of a tech CEO, had borrowed Raymond's notes during a lab project. Harmless, he'd said, just to compare results. Raymond had trusted him like a fool. Weeks later, Chase submitted a solo research draft that mimicked Raymond's theoretical model, almost word for word. The only difference? Chase turned it in first. When Raymond discovered it, he spoke up. The response was swift and cruel. He was accused of plagiarism, of accessing Chase's system, and attempting to discredit a peer. No hearing, no fair panel, just two white administrators in a quiet room, telling him, "There's no easy way to say this, Mr. Keller." They didn't say race. They didn't say bias. They didn't need to. MIT revoked his academic privileges. His scholarship was suspended. His reputation obliterated. Raymond didn't fight back after the second meeting. He'd seen what happened to students who did. Instead, he packed his things, left his dorm at 2 a.m., and never returned. The drafting table stayed behind, empty. He found work at a machine shop, then moved city to city. No one hired him for engineering. His record was stained. Eventually, he stopped trying, until Harvard offered a janitorial position, and he said yes. At least here he could smell the chalk, watch students rush past with blueprints in hand, pretend the past had never happened. He had lived like a shadow, until Aldridge's challenge, until that board, until Naomi. Raymond's eyes snapped back to the present. The chalk hovered again, his arm steady now. With a single stroke he wrote the first coefficient. It was subtle, tucked into the corner, just a test of balance. The equation danced in his mind, clearer now. This wasn't just about the solution, it was about resurrection. Naomi stood a few feet back, her eyes locked on his hand, her phone forgotten in her pocket. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Raymond continued, slowly, methodically. He didn't rush. He didn't need to prove anything. Every mark he made wasn't just math. It was memory reclaiming territory. Halfway through the fourth line, he paused. His hand trembled again. But not from fear. From rage. Because he remembered what Chase said that final day, when he passed Raymond outside the administration building with that smug, untouchable grin. "You should have just kept your mouth shut, man. I didn't take anything that wasn't already mine." Raymond had never responded. But now, here, with each variable he solved, he was answering that insult in fluent mathematics. He stepped back. The board was now a live machine, moving under its own gravity. Naomi gasped softly, not because she understood all of it, but because the shape of the solution was emerging, symmetrical, bold, undeniable. And then something unexpected. Raymond stopped. He erased the last two lines. Naomi stepped forward. "Wait, what are you doing?" Raymond's face was unreadable. It's too clean, he said. What? He'll say I copied it. If it's perfect, they'll think it's stolen. It needs texture, gaps, struggle, just enough imperfection to prove I was working. Naomi blinked. You're editing your own genius? I'm surviving it. She looked at him, stunned. That's what they've reduced you to. Raymond turned back to the board, rewriting the final line with deliberate asymmetry. That's what they did a long time ago, he said. I'm just adjusting. As he stepped back again, the board now looked like a live organism, brilliant, yet touched with human breath. A riddle solved not by a machine, but a mind weathered by war. Naomi took a photo, her hands shaking slightly. And then her phone buzzed. She looked down. An anonymous message. A screenshot. Her own name in an email thread. Subject: disciplinary review. Unauthorized recording in academic settings. She read the sender aloud. Aldridge, at Harvard. Her hands froze. Raymond saw the panic bloom across her face. What is it? She handed him the phone. His chest tightened as he read the message. Aldridge was already moving. He wasn't going to argue the problem. He was going to erase them both. Naomi's phone buzzed again. A new message. This time with no text, just an attachment. She opened it. It was a photo of her entering room 2114, the night before, taken from inside the building. Someone else had been watching them. Raymond Keller arrived early the next morning at room 2114, the door still slightly ajar, light streaming in from the corridor. He paused in the threshold, sensing the echo of chalk dust in the air, and glanced at the board. It was clean, immaculately wiped, as though the previous night's problem had never existed. His heart tightened. He remembered the long watches, the silent hours bent over those equations, the whisper of chalk on the board like a confession. And now empty. He placed his mop bucket by the wall and leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, his uniform faintly bearing the scent of pine from the night's cleaning. He stared at the blank board and felt something inside him recoil. He had solved a challenge deliberately laid for him, but now that evidence was gone, he squared his shoulders and moved to the blackboard ledge, touched a piece of chalk as though deciding whether to leave it there or take it with him. His reflection in the glass pane beside the door looked older, worn but also sharper. A man remembering his shape. Just then the stairwell door clicked. A soft footstep behind him. He turned. It was Naomi Sutter, leaning against the wall, her phone in hand, her expression a mixture of awe and concern. She held up the screen, showing a paused video. Grainy, stairwell vantage, showing him silhouette leaning at the board, chalk in hand, solving the figure that had seemed built to trap him. Mr. Keller, she said quietly. I hope I'm not interrupting. Her voice trembled with respect and urgency. He shook his head slightly, his lips pressed together. No, you're not interrupting. Naomi swallowed. I recorded this. I didn't mean to be hidden. I just saw something, and I couldn't stop myself.
Nee.
She tapped the screen. You were solving it. I watched. It wasn't just a mistake. It was you. Raymond's gaze flickered to the phone, then away. You shouldn't have recorded it. I know, she said. But you should know how big this is. It's not just the board. It's the message. Her eyes locked with his. They underestimated you before. Maybe because they assumed you never would show what you can do. Raymond exhaled slowly. Assumptions carry weight, he said, voice low. Naomi nodded. I'm studying engineering and social justice. I'm mixed black and white, and I've never seen anything like this. Janitors don't solve the professor's toughest problem. At least not in the stories I grew up hearing. Raymond studied her. What are you going to do with that video? She hesitated. I don't know yet, but I want to show someone. Maybe the department, maybe the student paper, someone has to see it. Her bravery sparked something in him. Trust, yet the trust flickered because of what had come before. Because trust for him was costly. Meanwhile, word had begun to wander. Whispers in the hallways. A TA saw someone standing late with chalk in hand. A student had overheard a cleaning cart parked outside room 24 at an odd hour. A rumor reached Aldridge's office. The janitor solved the unsolvable. It felt like air shifting around a flame. Raymond moved quietly to drop his mop bucket into the utility closet, each wheel creaking softly in the silence. Every noise amplified in that building. With each step he felt the walls contracting slightly, as though they were recalibrating to someone new. The invisible was becoming visible. Naomi followed him a few paces behind. Professor Aldridge erased the board before class, she said. Someone told me. He pretended like nothing happened. Raymond froze. The bucket nearly tipped. He gripped the handle. He erased it? Yes. Naomi's voice gained determination. He walked in just before lecture, wiped the entire board clean. One student looked up and asked, "Where did the problem go?" He answered, "It was preparation for next class." The students were puzzled. Raymond closed his eyes for a moment. He felt an ugly echo in his chest, recognition of a sort of institutional denial, something he knew too well. The math had been erased. The proof of his intelligence vanished in an act of omission, and it was performed with a kind of casual cruelty. He opened his eyes. "What did you record after that?" She looked down at her phone. "I captured your chalk mark, and then I started filming the board again after he wiped it clean." The board was blank. The students entered. He taught the class as though nothing had happened. Raymond turned away from the mirror glass, lifting his chin. "Then we have a problem," he said quietly. Naomi nodded. "Yes, a big one." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the building pressing around them. Then Naomi asked, "Will you let me show that video?" He closed his eyes again. He thought of the old days when he sat in labs, surrounded by peers, when his name meant something, when he wasn't invisible. He thought of the accusers who had labeled him disruptive, of the grades altered, the scholarship pulled. He thought of the janitorial uniform on his back, and the university halls he cleaned, stepping over his own footprints. "Yes," he said finally, "but on one condition." She leaned forward. "What condition?" "That you give it to someone who can guarantee protection. Because once this hits, they will try to erase you too." Naomi nodded, understanding the shadow. "I know." As she turned to leave, Raymond watched her go. The board remained blank. The hero problem that had awoken him was gone. Erased. Denied. As though the world would rather pretend he never solved anything than admit he existed. From the stairwell came a faint clatter. Raymond's head snapped up. The door to the corridor was ajar. A cleaning cart, sitting in the hallway. No one visible. Just the low hum of fluorescent lights. Raymond moved toward the door. Naomi's phone still in her hand. He left the mop bucket where it stood, walked to the hallway, glanced over his shoulder at Naomi, now standing at the threshold of the stairwell. She held the phone with both hands. Her face. What he didn't see was the small glare of a camera lens peeking from behind the stairwell railing. Someone else recording them. Naomi caught his eye and nodded. Or maybe she didn't. It was too fast. Raymond felt his pulse shift. Someone else was in the game. He closed the door behind him softly, and looked back at the board one last time. The chalk mark he had made the night before remained faint, but visible under the soft morning light. It looked like a whisper of defiance. Raymond turned away. As he stepped into the corridor, his phone buzzed with an unknown caller ID. Univest Security. He stared at the screen, dread tightening in his chest. Naomi couldn't sleep, not after what she'd seen on the board, not after what Raymond had revealed, not just with chalk, but with silence. It wasn't only the mechanics problem that haunted her, it was the years of brilliance he had clearly swallowed down just to survive. She lay awake replaying the image in her head, the way he erased two perfect lines to make his genius more palatable, less threatening, more believable. By morning her conviction had hardened into something immovable. She wouldn't let the truth disappear again. She posted the photo anonymously on Harvard's internal discussion forum, used mostly by undergrads to trade study notes and share gossip. The caption was simple, bold. Solved overnight, not by a student. No name, no context, no credits, just the raw image of the board. It took less than 2 hours for it to explode. By noon the post had over 600 upvotes, and 36 threads spiraling into chaos. One user wrote, "I took that class last semester. Aldridge said this was a 10-year unsolved question. No way it got finished overnight." Another chimed in, "Taz say it's right. Whoever did this has grad-level mind at least." Naomi watched the comments roll in, each one peeling away another layer of doubt from Raymond's invisible legacy. But with attention came suspicion. Aldridge, like an old predator sensing movement in the water, struck fast. Within the next 24 hours, a new post surfaced, this time under Aldridge's department login. Calm, controlled, deceptive. Clarification on recent post regarding advanced mechanics problem. While it is flattering that students find the problem engaging, I must correct the narrative. I myself solved the equation late Wednesday night, after our seminar ended. It had been occupying my mind for months. I'm glad it sparked curiosity. But there is no mystery here. The comment section split open. Half the students nodded in admiration. The other half were skeptical. One anonymous reply stood out. Then why is the handwriting different? And another, how did you solve it late at night, if the janitor's cart was outside 214 the same time? That was the first time someone outside the inner circle even mentioned the janitor. Naomi's fingers hesitated above her keyboard. She knew she had more. Video, audio, timestamps, the photo of Raymond halfway through the problem. But if she dropped everything at once, she wouldn't just reveal the truth. She'd paint a target on Raymond's back, and on hers. Aldridge's statement wasn't just a lie. It was a warning. By that evening, Naomi met Raymond outside the campus library. He stood in the shadow of the west arch, hood up, hands tucked into his coat pockets. You posted it? He asked, voice low. She nodded. Anonymously. Just the board. His gaze didn't leave her. He's already trying to claim it. I know. Raymond didn't look surprised, just tired. He's protecting his status, his ego, his institution. And I'm protecting the truth. Raymond gave her a long look. Truth doesn't always win here, Naomi. She looked away. It will this time. But behind her brave front, she was already seeing the cracks. Her email had been flagged twice by the engineering department, IT staff for suspicious sharing activity. One of her TA friends warned her quietly that Aldridge had asked about her academic conduct, and when she returned to her dorm that night, a typed note had been slid under her door. Careful who you make into heroes. Some stories don't belong to you. There was no signature, no logo, just those 12 words on a crisp folded sheet of white paper. She read it 5 times, trying to decode the threat. Was it warning her to back off? Was it suggesting she was appropriating Raymond's story? Or was it implying something worse, that someone knew she had the proof? She snapped a photo of the note and sent it to Raymond with no message. Just the 10 minutes later he replied, "Meet me, back of Jefferson. Tonight, 9 p.m. It was dark when she arrived. The brick walls loomed over her, the same building where he had silently solved the unsolvable. Now, it felt like a trap. Raymond appeared from the shadows like smoke, calm, composed, but sharper now. His eyes scanned the courtyard like a soldier. You okay? She asked. He handed her a flash drive. These are my old project logs. From MIT. Before it all ended. Naomi blinked. Why are you giving me this? Because it's time someone knew everything. She took the drive with both hands, the weight of it disproportionate to its size. What happened to you, Raymond? She asked softly. He hesitated. Then, finally, I got framed. A classmate stole my research. They believed him. I didn't even get a hearing. Just silence. Expulsion came wrapped in smiles and phrases like academic integrity and institutional trust. Naomi's voice dropped. Was it because you were black? His smile was hollow. That's the only part they didn't say out loud. She wanted to ask more, but something stopped her. The pain in his voice wasn't past tense. It was alive, still burning behind his composure. The next morning she uploaded part of the MIT logs to a private Google Drive. Not everything, just enough to show Raymond's authorship on prior complex systems. She included his name, date stamps and early patents. She compiled them into a PDF titled Uncredited Genius, The Erased Legacy of Raymond Keller. Then she attached it to a burner email and sent it to a select list. A few student journalists, an ethics committee contact, and an anonymous tip line for campus activism. She thought it would take days. It took hours. By mid-afternoon, the PDF was trending on student social media, with the hashtag #JanRaymondKeller. The narrative shifted rapidly. Now it wasn't just about a janitor solving a math problem. It was about an institution that once exiled him now trying to steal his mind again. Students posted screenshots, comparisons, handwriting analysis, timeline receipts. People began asking uncomfortable questions. And that's when Naomi's phone buzzed again. A different sender this time. Unknown number. Just a message. Stop digging, or someone will bury you next to him. Her hands went cold. She sent the message to Raymond, but he never responded. An hour later, her roommate noticed a black sedan parked across from their dorm. Engine running. Same car, every day since the post. The whispers were no longer confined to forums. Naomi could hear them in real classrooms now. The girl who tried to make a janitor a genius. The professor being accused of theft. The racial undertones weren't subtle anymore. They were knives. One student told her outright, "Why are you trying to turn this place into a circus? He cleans floors. That's not injustice. That's a job." She didn't respond. But inside, the fire only grew. That night, Naomi logged into the forum under her original account and posted the unedited video. Raymond. The board. The chalk. His handwriting. The silence. The math. Undeniable. The truth. Then she logged off and turned off her phone. Whatever happened next, she had done what she could. But when she arrived at class the next morning, something was wrong. Her seat was occupied. Not by a student, but by Professor Aldridge himself. He stood when she walked in, calm and poised. "Miss Sutter," he said, "come with me." Her heart froze. Every student in the room turned. A silence so complete fell over them. It felt like the room had been vacuum sealed. Naomi followed him into the hallway and saw 2 campus security officers waiting by the dean's office door, holding a folder with her name on it. Harvard's halls had never been quiet, but after Naomi's video dropped, they buzzed with a new kind of frequency, colder, sharper, and far more dangerous. Students whispered in the library, behind half-open laptops, and inside muted Discord chats. Professors spoke in hushed tones behind closed doors. Department heads exchanged urgent emails, laced with fear and fury, and the custodial staff, once invisible, now walked on eggshells, as though one wrong mop stroke could draw fire. The equation wasn't just solved. It had fractured something sacred. And the academic elite? They weren't ready. Within hours of the video surfacing, Aldridge convened an emergency meeting with 3 senior faculty members in the Department of Mechanical Engineering. The official pretext was to address potential academic misconduct. The real motive: damage control. He stood in his office, arms folded, lips pressed into a white slash across his face. Across from him sat Dr. Ruth Henderson, head of research integrity, and Dr. Victor Lane, who taught applied systems design, a man known for his razor-thin patience and razor-thinner tolerance for disruption. Aldridge didn't speak first. He didn't need to. Henderson opened her leather-bound notebook. "Carl," she began, "the handwriting in that video, can you confirm it isn't yours?" He paused, then smiled thinly. "Let's just say, if I were solving the problem, I'd have used vector calculus, not Newtonian." Lane chuckled. "So it wasn't you?" "No. But I'm more concerned about where that equation went when the board was erased. Someone tampered with my workspace." Henderson narrowed her eyes. "You're suggesting someone broke in to impersonate a solution?" "I'm suggesting," Aldridge said carefully, "that we may be dealing with a case of academic fraud." Lane leaned back, smirking. "From who? The janitor?" The room paused. That word hung heavier than it should have. Aldridge kept his expression unreadable. "Well, it's clear that someone's orchestrating a narrative, possibly to embarrass the institution. Possibly for political reasons." Ruth's brow rose. "What kind of reasons?" "Let's not pretend," Aldridge said calmly. "We've seen this before. Flash viral videos, claims of brilliance from unverified sources, and suddenly you've got donors demanding change. This is an elite institution, Ruth, not a TikTok court." The implication was poisonous and intentional. That was the first real moment. Raymond Keller became more than a man. He became a threat. By the following morning, the faculty break room became a whisper mill. "I heard he copied it from Aldridge's draft." Come on. A janitor solving gyroscopic systems. It's a stunt. Even if he did solve it, where's the proof he understands it? And more insidiously, if this gets out of hand, every underachiever will claim bias the moment they fail. These weren't just words. They were shields, spoken by men and women who felt their territory encroached. Not by an equal, but by someone they had trained themselves not to see. And the racism was never loud. It never needed to be. It appeared in policy reviews, in quietly removed footage, in whispered conversations at alumni events. It echoed in the silence of institutional PR teams, who decided collectively not to release a statement. Raymond, meanwhile, returned to work like nothing had happened. Same mop, same corridors, but the stares had changed. Some were curious, others were venomous. More than a few held contempt. His supervisor, Mr. Dunley, handed him a formal warning slip with shaking hands. Violation, unauthorized use of academic property. Code 14B. Academic environment interference. Raymond stared at the slip. He didn't say a word. Dunley fumbled. I'm just following protocol, Ray. They're scared. Everyone's scared. Raymond took the paper, folded it neatly, slid it into his pocket. Later, Naomi found him in the basement hallway near the boiler room, where no cameras reached and no one bothered the maintenance crew. She was wearing a hoodie, her bag slung low, and her eyes were red from sleepless nights. You need to fight this, she said. Raymond was replacing a light panel in the ceiling, standing on a small ladder, unfazed. They're going to fire you! He didn't look down. They fired me once already. Years ago. She stepped closer. That was then. This is now. You are not alone this time. Raymond finally turned to face her. I was never alone before. I was invisible. Naomi's breath caught. I know what it feels like to be seen for the wrong reasons. But this is bigger than either of us now. He climbed down slowly. Naomi, I appreciate you more than you know. But I've lived long enough to understand what this place does to people like me who get too visible. She blinked. But what about your story? It's not a story they want to hear. She looked at him hard. That doesn't mean it's not worth telling. And just as the air between them turned heavy with truth, the door at the end of the hallway opened. A woman stepped in, tall. Silver hair pulled back in a braid, glasses with thin wire frames. She carried a rolled-up journal and wore an MIT alumni badge on her lapel. She looked like someone out of a memory, because she was. Raymond Keller, she asked. Raymond froze. Naomi turned. The woman stepped forward, voice curious but careful. I'm Dr. Sonia Patel. I'm visiting from Caltech, but I was a graduate student at MIT during your time. I just came from room. Raymond's throat tightened. And she unrolled the journal. Inside, a printout of the solution from Naomi's video. She traced the final line with her finger. This is exceptional, balanced, unorthodox, but undeniably brilliant. He said nothing. She looked up. Who wrote it? Raymond didn't answer. Naomi did. He did. Patel's eyes lit up. You. Still, he remained silent. Naomi stepped forward. He won't say it, but he's the one who solved it. Overnight, and now they're trying to erase it all. Dr. Patel closed the journal slowly. Her face changed, respect shifting into realization. Of course they are, she said softly. It's Harvard. Raymond raised an eyebrow. You believe me? She nodded once. I don't need to believe. I recognize the math. I saw your early papers. They still circulate at Caltech. Quietly. No one talks about where they came from, but we know. He swallowed hard. Patel leaned closer. If they bury you, they'll have to bury your legacy too. And that won't be as easy. Raymond exhaled slow and long, like a man letting go of air he didn't know he'd held for years. Naomi stepped beside him. For the first time, something in Raymond's stance shifted. Not fear, not silence. The moment that shattered her wasn't the math. It was the silence. The way Raymond paused before writing, like asking permission from ghosts. The way his fingers hesitated over the chalk as if calculating not just vectors but consequences. It was genius stitched with fear. A symphony of intellect drowned beneath decades of silence. She uploaded the video at 2:37 a.m. under a burner account. Title: Harvard's Janitor just solved the impossible problem. Watch. No clickbait, no edits, no overlays, just truth. By the time she woke up 5 hours later, it had been shared over 90,000 times. Within 24 hours, it crossed 1 million views. By the second day, it hit 10 million. The comments poured in, first with awe, then outrage. He's better than 90% of these PhDs. This is what systemic racism hides. Harvard buried him. And now we know why. Raymond Keller was no longer invisible. He was viral. And that terrified him. When Naomi knocked on the storage room door that morning, she found him seated on a stool, surrounded by his old maintenance supplies, watching the video silently on someone else's phone. It wasn't even his device. One of the younger janitors had shown it to him, bright-eyed and shaking. He didn't smile, didn't speak, just watched the world discover what he had buried. Naomi stepped inside. It's spreading. I'm sorry, I should have told you I posted it. He looked up slowly. It's too late to apologize. She blinked. Are you angry? No, he said. I'm terrified. Naomi's heart dropped. You're not alone anymore. Raymond looked past her, to a window barely cracked open. That doesn't mean I'm safe. The following morning, 2 news vans camped outside Jefferson Hall. A reporter from a popular tech YouTube channel managed to sneak into the engineering building, pretending to be a grad student, just to snap a photo of room 2. Another masked herself as a teaching assistant and tried to corner Raymond by the elevators. The building's silence turned suffocating. His name was trending on TikTok, Twitter, even Reddit's front page. Hashtags surged. Raymond Keller, Harvard Truth, Hidden Genius. But not all the attention was praise. With the visibility came the backlash. Comment threads exploded with coded language. If he's that smart, why is he cleaning floors? This screams affirmative action narrative building. Come on. It's staged. No janitor is doing upper-level dynamics. Raymond stopped entering rooms when students were present. His shifts grew shorter. His routes more indirect. Even the janitorial closet felt exposed. And Naomi, once the fire starter, now found herself cornered. The university sent her a formal warning for violating digital recording policy in a private academic setting. Her advisor ghosted her. Her inbox flooded with messages, some supportive, others laced with malice. One read simply, "You've made powerful enemy. Better pray your scholarship holds." Then at 4:12 p.m. on a Wednesday, an official email from the Office of Student Conduct landed in her inbox. Subject: interim academic suspension. Naomi Sutter. The message cited gross misconduct, misuse of academic facilities, and unapproved surveillance. Effective immediately, she was barred from class attendance, labs and departmental spaces, until her hearing. She forwarded it to Raymond without a caption. He responded with just one line. "I never wanted you dragged into this." But Naomi wasn't retreating. She knew the stakes now. She also knew Aldridge had just pulled his biggest move. That same afternoon, Professor Aldridge filed a formal complaint with the university's legal counsel, accusing Raymond of trespassing, unauthorized access to sensitive academic material, and academic fraud. The complaint claimed that Raymond had broken protocol, interfered with official instruction, and fabricated academic content with intent to mislead. The language was strategic. It didn't scream racist, but it bled with it. The implications were devastating. Raymond, a janitor, was not only unqualified to interact with the content, but his presence near the board, even while cleaning, was now deemed criminally suspicious. Naomi stormed into the building the next morning, shoulders squared, heart pounding. She found Raymond in the stairwell between floors, leaning against the wall, the disciplinary notice in hand. "You're not saying anything," she said. "Why aren't you fighting back?" He looked up, calm as stone. "'Cause they're using the same playbook they used on me 30 years ago. It worked then. It won't work now. It already is." She bit her lip. "You didn't trespass. You were cleaning. They don't care. You didn't steal anything. They'll say I did." Naomi dropped her bag on the steps. "This isn't about the board anymore. It's about your right to exist in that room without apology." Raymond chuckled bitterly. That's what they've been fighting against since day one. And then a twist neither of them expected. A faculty email thread leaked, posted anonymously on an internal whistleblower site used by student journalists. It contained direct messages between Aldridge, Lane, and 2 other faculty members, discussing Raymond in racialized terms. One line hit the hardest. "We cannot let janitorial staff think they're intellectual equals. That's a dangerous precedent." Another, "If the public believes he's capable, our credibility evaporates. This is about institutional control." Naomi stared at the screen, shaking. She printed the emails. All of them. She handed them to Raymond. He didn't read them right away. He just said, "Now they've made the mistake I waited for." "What mistake?" "They put their racism in writing." Raymond stood up, his voice steady, his spine straight. His silence cracked open. Naomi watched as he walked toward the administration office, not hiding anymore. And behind him, for the first time, followed 2 custodians. Then 3 students. Then a teaching assistant. By the time he reached the main floor, 20 people walked with him. And more were waiting outside. But the building's front doors swung open before he could reach them. A security officer stepped inside. Behind him, a lawyer from Harvard's legal department. Raymond stopped in place. The lawyer held a folder. "Mr. Keller," she said, voice cold, "you're being placed on administrative leave pending full investigation." She handed him the notice, then added, "A cease and desist order has also been filed. You are not to step foot in any academic room on campus, including room 24. The room wasn't a courtroom, but it felt like one. The heavy wood paneling, the stillness of the air, the board members perched on their high seats like judges. Everything about the hearing exuded power. Not the kind that shouted, but the kind that whispered just loud enough to remind you who built the walls. Raymond sat at the far table, his posture upright, his hands clasped calmly in his lap. He wore the same thing he always wore, his Harvard Facilities Services uniform, name badge sewn into his chest. He hadn't dressed it up, hadn't tried to become someone else for the occasion. He knew better. Naomi sat beside him, her shoulders tense, a notepad in her lap, but untouched. Her knuckles were white, where they gripped her pen. At the opposing table sat Professor Aldridge, pristine as always, his tailored gray suit, a subtle symbol of generational comfort. Next to him, a lawyer with a $600 haircut, reviewed typed notes with a bored expression that said, "This will be over soon." The board was composed of 3 faculty chairs, 1 administrative dean, and a student liaison, who looked like she wished she could disappear into her blazer. Each had a copy of the case file in front of them, a folder with Raymond Keller's name typed across the top. No title, just his name like an accusation. The hearing opened with procedural statements, read aloud with the monotone precision of bureaucratic theater. It took nearly 40 minutes before the actual content began. Raymond didn't flinch. He had waited 30 years. What were 40 more minutes? Naomi was called first. She rose, walked slowly to the podium, and turned toward the board. Her voice, when it came, was clear but trembling. "I'm not here as a friend or an activist. I'm here as a witness," she said. "I saw Mr. Keller solve the problem in room 2121 with my own eyes. I recorded it. I posted it. I take full responsibility for that." She paused. Her hands shook as she flipped the page in her notes. "But I also know what I saw. I've sat in Aldridge's class. I've watched him mock students, silence them, especially students who look like me, or Mr. Keller. I know what it means to be overlooked because of who you are." That equation wasn't just solved, it was rewritten, not by Aldridge, not by a student, by a janitor who'd been erased long before he ever picked up the chalk. A long silence followed. The board members scribbled notes without looking at her. Aldridge's lawyer stood. "Miss Sutter, you're under disciplinary review for unauthorized recordings. Do you believe that colors your motives in this matter?" Naomi didn't hesitate. "If telling the truth cost me my seat here, then this institution isn't worth sitting in." Murmurs rippled across the room. A quiet tension grew in Aldridge's posture. Next came 2 expert witnesses, a physicist from a neighboring college, and a retired engineer who'd reviewed Raymond's solution after it went viral. Both confirmed its originality, its brilliance, and its depth. "This wasn't memorized," the engineer said. "This was lived. Whoever wrote this was born doing math." Aldridge finally stood when it was his turn. He approached the center, his voice composed, the cadence rehearsed. "I understand the emotions this case has stirred," he began. "But we must remember that institutions function on order, on accountability. The classroom is not open territory. Unauthorized access, tampering with instructional materials, and viral spectacle do not equate to credibility." He turned slightly, making sure to look at each board member. Mr. Keller was not a student, not a TA. He had no reason to be near academic content, much less to claim ownership of it. And while I respect his prior experience, he was dismissed from MIT under a cloud of academic dishonesty. That context matters. Raymond's jaw twitched for the first time. Naomi gripped her chair. Aldridge continued. "I do not wish to see this man punished, but to elevate him above students who've sacrificed years in this discipline. That's dangerous precedent, and it undermines the integrity of our academic process." He returned to his seat, calm, controlled, as if justice were a math problem he'd already solved. The board called a short recess. Naomi leaned toward Raymond. "He lied," she whispered. "Twisted everything." Raymond nodded, slowly. "That's what they do when they've already decided the ending." 15 minutes later, the board reconvened. The chair, an older white man with a deep furrow between his brows, cleared his throat. "Before we begin our internal deliberation, is there anyone else who wishes to speak?" It was a rhetorical question. No one was listed. No one expected it. Then a voice, soft, almost hesitant. "I do." Heads turned. A woman at the back of the room, seated in the farthest corner, stood. She wore a scarf over her head and sunglasses. Her hands trembled as she reached into her bag. I have information. I wasn't called, but I was there. Years ago. The board chair squinted. And you are?
I'd rather not say in front of this room, she said.
But I was a teaching assistant at MIT during the year of Mr. Keller's expulsion. I witnessed conversations. I have documents. I believe they're relevant. Aldridge's face went pale. Raymond sat up. The woman stepped forward, pulling a sealed folder from her coat. Her fingers gripped it like a lifeline. Aldridge abruptly rose from his seat. This is absurd, he snapped. She's not on the witness list. This is a circus. The chair held up a hand. Let her speak. The woman lowered her scarf. Gasps echoed through the room. Naomi whispered, "Oh my God, that..." She was fired, Aldridge said sharply. For cause. She can't be trusted. The woman spoke clearly now. I wasn't fired. I was threatened into silence. I left MIT because I saw an email, one Aldridge sent to another professor, detailing how they'd pin academic theft on the scholarship kid if things got messy. I saved it. She placed the folder on the table. In this file are dated emails, transcripts, and 3 statements I drafted but never sent. I was too afraid. Her voice cracked. But I won't be afraid anymore. The board members leaned in, flipping open the folder slowly. Aldridge's lawyer whispered something urgently. Raymond said nothing. For the first time all day, he didn't need to. The room grew still, heavy, changed. The board chair finally looked up. Thank you. We will review this evidence immediately. The woman stepped back, breathing shakily, tears now trailing down her cheeks. As the board members began to read, a silent wave of understanding moved through the room. This wasn't just about Raymond anymore. It was about the systems that had allowed his erasure, the same systems that had protected Aldridge, that had labeled silence as professionalism and truth as disruption. Naomi reached for Raymond's hand again. This time, he took it. Just as the chair prepared to close the session for final deliberation, a secretary rushed in through the side door, holding a slip of paper. She whispered something into the chair's ear. He paled, then looked up and said, "We have just received notice that a second formal complaint has been filed. This time, against Professor Aldridge." The hearing chamber inside Harvard's administrative wing was colder than it needed to be. The walls lined with polished mahogany, and framed photos of old white men in robes seemed to press inward like witnesses themselves. A row of 5 board members sat elevated behind a long desk. Between them and the audience, a single rectangular table bore the weight of truth, denial, and 2 decades of buried history. Raymond sat on one end, wearing his standard Navy uniform, sleeves ironed, collar straight, but expression unreadable. Beside him, Naomi sat stiff-backed, fists clenched beneath the table. A student lawyer, young and over-prepared, flipped nervously through a binder of regulations. Across from them sat Aldridge, flanked by Harvard's institutional attorney, his arms crossed, expression smug, his hands clean as ever. For 2 days, testimony had ebbed and flowed, professors defending protocol, staff citing misconduct, and students awkwardly testifying to hearing something or noticing someone. Naomi had spoken with fire trembling as she recalled the fear, the emails, the threats. Raymond, in contrast, had said little. His voice remained low, deliberate. He refused to perform. But none of it changed the undercurrent. The room still leaned toward Aldridge. Tradition still held the pen. Until now, the board chair leaned forward. "You've requested a final witness?" Raymond's lawyer nodded. "Yes. She's just arrived." The door creaked open. A silence deeper than protocol fell across the room. In walked a tall black woman, in her early 60s, posture regal, hair streaked with gray, eyes sharp. She wore a simple gray suit, and carried only one item, a leather notebook, visibly worn along its spine. Naomi's eyes widened. Raymond's breath caught. "State your name for the record," the chair said. "Dr. Leona Price," she replied, voice crisp. "Former associate chair, Department of Mechanical Engineering, Massachusetts Institute of Technology." Gasps echoed in the back rows. Even the stenographer's hands paused above her keyboard. "Dr. Price," the lead board member said, clearly flustered, "you weren't on the witness list." "I was requested by the student." She nodded toward Naomi. "And I agreed when I heard who this hearing was truly about." Aldridge sat back, jaw clenched. Raymond stared at her, not with anger, but with a flicker of something deeper, disbelief, grief. Maybe both. Dr. Price approached the center podium. She opened her notebook. I've come here to speak to what Harvard will not find in its records, she began, because this institution, like many, inherits the silence of others. She looked at Raymond. I taught this man when he was just a teenager. He entered MIT with the highest placement scores in his cohort. He excelled in theoretical mechanics, propulsion analytics, and thermodynamic systems. Not just good, not just promising. He was exceptional. She flipped a page. But during his third year, something happened. A report was filed accusing him of plagiarism. The accuser was a student named Chase Holloway. Aldridge's attorney immediately objected. That accusation was settled, overruled, the chair snapped. Continue. Dr. Price didn't flinch. Chase was the son of a wealthy alum. His family held significant influence over several endowments. What no one mentioned during the accusation was that Chase had previously borrowed Raymond's lab reports. Just for reference, he claimed. She took a breath. What's more, Raymond had submitted an early draft of his propulsion formula to me weeks before the alleged infraction. I had the files. I had the metadata. But I didn't speak. The room froze. Dr. Price's voice cracked for the first time. I let it pass. I told myself it wasn't my fight. I watched as he was dismissed, stripped of everything, and I stayed silent, because I was afraid of losing my own position. My tenure, my seat at a table that barely let me sit at it in the first place. She stepped back, tears in her eyes. I let fear speak louder than truth, and I've carried that shame every single day since. Raymond blinked slowly, jaw locked tight. No rage, just ache. Naomi reached under the table, gently resting her hand atop his. Dr. Price continued, voice steady now. I'm here to say this man did not cheat. He was not a thief of knowledge. He was its author. What was stolen was not data. It was his future. The board sat frozen. For the first time in the entire proceeding, Aldridge looked shaken. He turned to his attorney, whispering furiously. Raymond finally stood. He didn't move to the podium, just rose. I never asked for this witness, he said quietly. But I thank her. The board chair turned to him. Mr. Keller, do you wish to respond? Raymond's eyes scanned the room. I was told intelligence was enough, that if you worked hard, someone would notice. But in places like this, sometimes they don't want to see you. Because if they do, it means admitting that brilliance doesn't always come from familiar faces. He gestured toward the walls. It doesn't wear robes, or legacies, or last names they're used to pronouncing. He turned to Aldridge. This wasn't about math. It never was. It was about territory. I stepped where I wasn't invited, and you called that a crime. Naomi watched, breath caught between heartbreak and pride. The board whispered among themselves. Tension hung like humidity, thick, suffocating, charged. The chair finally spoke. We will recess for deliberation. The room exhaled. People stood. Some whispered. Some didn't move at all. Raymond sat back down. Naomi turned to Dr. Price. Why now? She asked. Price offered a bitter smile. Because no one else did. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Then 30. And then the door at the far end of the chamber opened. A young aide leaned in, whispering something into the chair's ear. The board members filed back in. Their faces looked even paler than before. The chair cleared his throat. We were prepared to render a preliminary decision. But a new development has just been presented. Aldridge frowned. What development? The chair glanced at the aide. The aide stood. Someone has requested to speak. A witness not on the list, but one we are compelled to hear from. Who? The chair asked. The aide looked up. She says she has documents that predate the MIT accusation, from internal faculty communications, regarding both Mr. Keller and Professor Aldridge. Raymond's eyes narrowed. What? The aide nodded. She's here. She's requesting anonymity until confirmed, but she claims to have received threats if she ever spoke up. Naomi leaned forward. Who is she? The aide opened the chamber door. A woman in a red coat stepped inside. Mid-40s. Nervous. Clutching a folder tight to her chest.
No one recognized her until she spoke.
I was Professor Aldridge's research assistant. During his sabbatical at MIT. The room turned to ice. Aldridge's chair screeched as he stood, eyes wide, lips parting before blurting. She was removed for misconduct. Her word means nothing, but the woman raised a trembling hand and said no. I have emails. I saw what you did, and this time I won't be silent. The verdict came on a Friday morning. delivered not with drama, but with bureaucracy. At exactly 9:02 a.m., the Harvard Office of Institutional Ethics released a 3-page report titled, Findings Regarding Allegations of Academic Misconduct, Procedural Interference, and Faculty Conduct. The summary, concise but seismic, read, Mr. Raymond Keller is fully exonerated of all accusations. Evidence confirms his authorship of the advanced mechanical solution. No grounds for trespassing or academic interference exist. Professor Carl Aldrich is hereby placed on administrative suspension pending further investigation for misconduct, retaliation, and obstruction of internal inquiry. No press conference, no apology, no formal recognition of what had really occurred. But the campus erupted anyway. By noon, a group of black students from the School of Engineering launched a silent protest in the quad, dressed in navy blue jumpsuits, each with a sewn-on patch that read "Beyond You." The phrase had already become a symbol, echoing Aldrich's original insult like poetic revenge. Naomi stood at the front, holding a chalkboard over her head. It read, "This mind isn't yours to erase." Meanwhile, the Harvard Alumni of Color Association released a public letter demanding systemic reforms, funding for equity programs, and an official apology to Raymond Keller. It was signed by 14 former students, including 2 former valedictorians and 3 Fortune 5. That same evening, the Harvard Black Graduate Alliance hosted a live-stream panel titled Brilliance in Overalls, The Keller Case and the Myth of Meritocracy. It drew more than 400,000 views. Raymond's face, captured from the viral video, chalk in hand, head slightly bowed in focus, had become an emblem. Some posted it as protest art. Others projected it onto the wall of the Jefferson Building overnight in a silent act of defiance. But Raymond himself remained silent. No interviews, no statements, no celebration. When a journalist from The Atlantic called Naomi for a quote, she said simply, "He's not interested in being a symbol. He wants to finish the work they once took from him." Inside his apartment, Raymond kept the blinds closed. The TV remained off. His phone, now flooded with texts, emails, and voice messages from strangers, academics, podcast producers, and even MIT officials, sat untouched on the counter. He spent the weekend sitting at his kitchen table, sketching diagrams on scrap paper, mechanical systems, gear differentials, magnetic couplings. Naomi dropped by once, with groceries. He barely looked up. His eyes stayed on the design. Because he knew the truth. Vindication wasn't justice. It was survival. Paused. He had been cleared. Yes, Aldrich had been suspended. Naomi's record was wiped. The school issued a statement praising courageous community members. But there were no reparations, no reinstatement offers, no apology. The institution didn't change. It flinched. Harvard's official statement was coldly diplomatic. "We remain committed to excellence, diversity, and institutional accountability. We appreciate all those who participated in this process with integrity." Critics called it performative. Others called it insulting. Raymond called it familiar. But behind the institutional frost, pressure was mounting. A wave of major donors began withholding funds, one anonymous donor pausing a $12 million endowment until Harvard could demonstrate ethical clarity. Admissions inquiries dropped. Minority student groups escalated demands for an independent diversity audit. Inside the Jefferson Building, 2 assistant professors resigned in quiet protest. A teaching assistant leaked a letter from faculty chat logs, admitting the administration knowingly allowed bias to shape internal policy. It was no longer just a scandal. It was a reckoning. But while the campus shook, Raymond stayed still. He wasn't interested in Harvard's apology. He was interested in building again. That's when the email arrived. Subject line: a design challenge, confidential, time-sensitive. Sender: Claire Holden, VP of Advanced Systems, Helix Dynamics Inc. He nearly deleted it. Then he opened it. "Dear Mr. Keller, we've followed the developments surrounding your case with great interest. Beyond the story, what struck us was your raw solution, the unfiltered brilliance and unconventional modeling. We've been stuck on a design plateau for 8 months, and your approach aligns with something we've been exploring. We'd like to offer you a confidential consulting position, independent, well compensated, and entirely in your control. The project is urgent, and frankly, we believe only you can solve it." Attached a NDA, a schematic draft, and a video walkthrough of a cutting-edge mechanical gearbox system, one being developed for use in sustainable aviation. Raymond stared at the screen. It wasn't just opportunity. It was permission. permission to step back into the world they once told him wasn't his. He shut the laptop gently, walked to the window, and opened the blinds for the first time in a week. Sunlight spilled into the room. Later that night, Naomi found him outside the Jefferson steps, alone, staring up at the building. It was past midnight. The halls were empty. He didn't look at her as she approached. "They still don't get it," she said quietly. "No," he replied. "But I do." She nodded, reading the weight in his voice. "I got an offer," he said after a pause. "From a firm, real work. Real challenge." Naomi's eyes widened. "That's incredible. It's not Harvard," he said. "And thank God for that." She smiled faintly. "Are you going to take it?" He looked at the building one last time. "They tried to bury me in this place. I'm not going to let them keep me here. Not in praise, not in apology, not in memory." Naomi exhaled slowly. "So what now?" Raymond turned to her. "Now I build." He began walking toward the exit gates, away from the institution that once erased him, and toward a future it could no longer control. But as he reached the sidewalk, his phone buzzed again. New email. Subject: Request for appearance. MIT 50th Anniversary Engineering Symposium. He tapped it open. "Mr. Keller, we are organizing a panel on transformative minds in mechanical design. We'd be honored to have you as a featured guest. Your early research has resurfaced in recent curriculum updates. Please let us know if you'd be willing to return to MIT as a speaker." Raymond stared at the screen. He didn't smile, didn't cry, but his fingers hovered over the reply button for a long time. Just as he began typing, another notification popped up. A direct message from an MIT research account. One sentence: "We need you to see what we found in your old lab notebooks. This changes everything." The lab was nothing like Harvard. No wood-paneled walls. No oil paintings of dead benefactors. No marble corridors meant to echo power. This space was stripped down clean metal, matte black surfaces, glass windows that reached from floor to ceiling, overlooking the heart of downtown Boston. It was built for invention, not intimidation, and Raymond belonged to it. The project brief from Helix Dynamics had been deceptively simple: reduce friction loss in multi-gear electric transmissions by 18%, but Raymond didn't just reduce it, he reimagined the system from the ground up. What began as consultation quickly became transformation. In 3 weeks he eliminated the need for a clutch-based transmission, replacing it with a self-regulating torque balancer. In 6 weeks he implemented a modular magnetorheological fluid system for instantaneous response. By month 3 his prototype cut efficiency losses by over 40%, blowing past every known benchmark in the field. People inside the company began calling it the Keller gearbox. He never called it that. To him it was just work finally being done, without sabotage. Raymond spent hours sketching and testing, often in silence, music playing low, usually Coltrane or Nina Simone, his mind dancing with formulas. His desk was lined with worn notebooks and mechanical drafts. The chalkboard wall behind him bore layers of equations written over themselves, like a living journal. One afternoon, Claire Holden, the VP who recruited him, entered the lab holding a manila folder. She leaned against the doorframe and watched him for a full minute before speaking. "You know what this is, right?" she asked, holding up the folder. Raymond wiped his hands on a cloth. "I'm guessing the patent paperwork?" She smiled. "You guessed correctly. It's done. You're the lead inventor. Your name's on every page." He didn't flinch, just nodded once. Claire stepped forward. "You know they're gonna come calling. Harvard and MIT, everyone." He turned back to the prototype on the table, adjusting a copper coil with precision. They had their chance. Claire tilted her head. "You sure you don't want to do a press release? This would position you as the next face of innovation. We could frame it on your terms." Raymond set the tool down. No faces, just the work. She studied him for a moment longer, then left without pressing further. Word of the design began leaking to the engineering world, first as a whisper, then a shout. Trade journals called it a generational leap in torque regulation. Green Tech Labs named Raymond one of the top 10 minds quietly changing the future. His paper, submitted anonymously to a mechanical physics journal, was accepted and praised for elegance, clarity, and unprecedented insight. But Raymond still refused interviews. He didn't care about rebranding. He cared about reclaiming. MIT reached out once. A dean sent a polite message. "We'd love to welcome you back to campus to discuss your past contributions." Raymond deleted the email. Harvard tried harder. Their Office of Advancement sent a glossy package, an invitation to speak at a legacy leadership series, a handwritten note calling him a valued member of our extended community, and a gift pen engraved with Harvard innovators. He mailed the pen back in silence. His former workplace, Harvard Facility Services, reached out too. Quietly, the head of HR offered him his old role back, with a revised title and expanded responsibilities. It was a clumsy attempt to save face. Raymond replied with a single line. No institution that mops genius off the floor deserves to hold it up as its crown. But he wasn't angry anymore. He was building. And for the first time in his adult life, no one stood between him and his imagination. Still, late at night, in the quiet of the lab, his thoughts sometimes wandered back to that whiteboard in room 221. The moment everything shifted. The insult. The silence. The numbers. The chalk. The quiet rebellion that sparked a storm. Naomi visited often now, her presence both grounding and electric. She was finishing her degree remotely after winning her case, and she'd begun developing her own startup focused on equity and STEM access for marginalized communities. One evening, she brought Raymond a framed photo. It was a still from the viral video, him at the board, eyes locked on the math, chalk paused mid-air. At the bottom, she had added in tiny script. It was never beyond you. He didn't cry, but he stood very still for a long time. Then he placed it on the lab's windowsill, facing the city. Weeks later, just as the prototype entered its final stage of validation, Naomi burst into the lab, holding her phone. "You need to see this," she said. Raymond looked up from his notes. She turned the screen toward him. It was a video. A podcast, actually. The host was a popular conservative academic influencer, a man known for using phrases like reverse racism and merit under attack. But the guest sitting across from him, sipping water and smiling thinly, was unmistakable. Professor Carl Aldrich. Raymond's chest didn't tighten, his hands didn't shake. But something in the air grew cold. Naomi pressed play. The host leaned forward. "So, Professor, you've had quite a year. You were suspended by Harvard after claims that a janitor solved your math problem. What's your take on all that?" Aldridge chuckled. "Well, I think we're seeing the cost of letting narrative outweigh reality. It's fashionable to elevate outsiders right now, but institutions can't run on feelings. I never confirmed that he solved it. I still believe it was a misunderstanding, probably exaggerated by the student who recorded it." Naomi's mouth dropped. "Is he?" Raymond raised a hand gently. "Let it play." The host nodded. "So you're saying you still stand by your original work?" Aldridge nodded casually. "Yes. And while I'm not allowed to speak on specifics due to legal matters, I will say this. If we let every viral moment override decades of academic rigor, we're heading toward chaos." The host smiled. "You heard it here first." Raymond turned the phone over and set it on the table. Naomi stared at him. "He's lying. On air." "I know. He's rewriting it again." Raymond exhaled. "They always try to reclaim what they lose. So what are you going to do?" He stood slowly and walked to the chalkboard wall. He erased the top section and began sketching something new. "Let him speak," he said. Naomi frowned. "That's it?" Raymond didn't answer at first. His hand moved with focused rhythm, drawing lines, force curves, pressure points. His voice was calm when it finally came. "History listens louder when you stop talking and start building." He underlined one equation, then looked out the window. On the other side of the lab, the monitor pinged. A notification. Naomi walked over, clicked it open, and gasped. It was a leaked internal message from the podcast producer. Subject: urgent. MIT donor threatening lawsuit if Aldridge's statements aren't removed. Says Keller's old work predates Aldridge's thesis. Attached was a PDF titled 1999 Confidential Draft. MIT Lab Archives. Authored Raymond Keller. The elevation of Raymond Keller didn't come with a pedestal. It came with a target. Within weeks of the patent approval for his revolutionary gearbox, and just days after the leaked podcast email exposed Aldridge's decades-old academic theft, the backlash arrived, not in press releases or formal debates, but in the shadows coded language, anonymous forums and digital footprints designed to smear, not confront. First came the fake reviews. On obscure academic blogs and niche tech forums, anonymous commenters questioned Raymond's work. Unoriginal, suspiciously over-engineered, likely derived from older military-grade research, uncredited. Then came the YouTube takedowns. edited clips of Raymond at the chalkboard, with dramatic music, overlaid with right-wing commentary. They accused him of being a media plant, a social experiment in forced diversity, and worse, a hoax engineered to discredit white academia. Raymond didn't respond, but the silence didn't stop the fire. Someone hacked into his early design files. One draft of the gearbox model was leaked with key errors introduced. The altered version was uploaded to a whistleblower site, with the title, Raymond Keller's Fraudulent Blueprint. Within 48 hours, 3 engineering journals received anonymous tips discrediting his work. The media tried to chase him. Naomi intercepted one reporter at the lab door. Others emailed her under aliases, pretending to be supporters, asking for behind-the-scenes truth. It was coordinated, surgical, and personal. And then it escalated. The Helix Dynamic Security team called Raymond into a private meeting. Their head of digital security, a former NSA consultant, stood by a projection screen displaying IP logs. "Someone breached your server credentials," he said. "They masked it through VPNs, but we backtraced multiple pings." Raymond remained calm. "Where did they lead?" The consultant paused. "All routes rerouted through an academic server, specifically, an inactive login tied to Harvard Engineering." Claire Holden, standing to the side, crossed her arms. "Someone inside?" The consultant shook his head. "Not current faculty. But the trail leads to one specific origin before it forks off." He clicked, and a name appeared. Elliot Vance, former TA Professor Carl Aldridge's advanced mechanics class. Raymond leaned forward. He was there, back when it started. Naomi, who had joined via call, froze. "I remember him. He was the one who erased the board that morning, after Raymond had solved the problem." Raymond's jaw tensed. He wasn't just following orders. He was protecting someone. Claire narrowed her eyes. "He's not just covering up, he's retaliating." 2 days later, Naomi traced a digital breadcrumb, buried in a corrupted zip file, attached to one of the phishing emails sent to Raymond's Helix account. It looked like garbage code at first, but inside was an encrypted line. "Stop digging, or he disappears." She stared at the screen, heart hammering. This wasn't an academic smear campaign anymore. This was a threat. She ran a geolocation scan, and found the origin bounced across 4 servers. But the starting IP, Cambridge, Massachusetts. She called Raymond immediately. "You need to see this," she said. He arrived at her apartment 20 minutes later, coat still damp from the rain. Naomi pulled up the screen. "Someone's coming after your work. After you." He studied the screen. His voice was quiet. "They've already erased me once." "Not like this," she said. "This isn't institutional. This is personal, deliberate." He looked at her. "Aldridge?" "No," she replied. "Elliot Vance. He's behind the sabotage. I checked digital records. After you went viral, he reactivated old admin credentials, used them to request your work from MIT's archive, probably looking for something to discredit you." Raymond frowned. "What does he get out of this?" Naomi tapped the screen again. "That's the part I wasn't expecting. Vance didn't just work for Aldridge. He was working on his own paper, years ago. And guess what?" She opened a PDF file. It was a scanned draft of a 2003 research proposal. Authored E. Vance and C. Aldridge. Titled Torque Redistribution via Modified Inertial Resonance, a Novel Path Toward Clutchless Gear Transition. Raymond's breath caught. It mirrored his new design. "They lifted it," Naomi whispered. "Parts of your old MIT work. It's here. Fragments of your early lab notebooks. They built this fake research on top of your erased legacy." Raymond sat back slowly. He had fought silence. Now he was facing theft, repackaged in someone else's name. The gravity of the sabotage wasn't academic. It was existential. They hadn't just tried to destroy his future. They had already profited off the ashes of his past. Naomi's voice was firm. "We can go public. Leak this. Call in legal support." Raymond shook his head. "Not yet. If we fire too early, they'll spin it again."
Naomi looked at him. "Then what?"
"We build louder than they bury." Raymond spent the next several weeks in focused silence, tweaking his design, submitting updates, filing for secondary patents on system components to solidify legal protection. He quietly filed a formal claim with MIT's Intellectual Property Division, backed by Naomi's archive comparisons. It triggered an internal audit. Then, quietly, his legal team served a cease and desist order to Vance and Aldridge. citing intellectual property theft. They expected a counter-argument. Instead, Vance vanished. His faculty profiles were wiped. His LinkedIn removed. A ghost gone mid-storm. But the damage he left behind was visible. Raymond's phone began receiving anonymous texts. One, truth doesn't make you untouchable. Another, you were better off mopping. Naomi received a package, no return address. Inside, a copy of Raymond's MIT thesis, torn in half, soaked in red ink. No. Claire doubled lab security.
But Raymond's resolve didn't crack.
Instead, he began a new project. One Naomi hadn't seen before. It was smaller, sleeker, a prototype of a portable gear modulation device, with direct applications for emergency medical robotics. He said little about it. Just worked. Each part more precise than the last. This one, he told Naomi, isn't about proving them wrong. What is it about? He looked at her. It's about building a future where I don't have to exist in their approval. But just when the fire began to calm, Naomi received another message, this time through an encrypted Proton Mail account. No sender name. Just one line. Stop, or he disappears. Her hand froze on the mouse. Attached was a photo. It showed Raymond walking through the parking garage beneath the lab. The timestamp was from the night before. The photo was taken from behind, at close range. Naomi grabbed her phone and called Raymond, but it went straight to voicemail. The days that followed the parking garage threat passed like shadows across a sundial, uneven, shifting, and cold. Naomi checked her phone obsessively. Raymond hadn't answered her call. The voicemail had cut off mid-sentence. She'd called again, texted, nothing. It wasn't until 5 hours later that she finally heard the buzz of her phone. Raymond. Safe. Needed space. I'm at the water. She exhaled like she'd been holding her breath underwater. When she found him, he was sitting alone on a bench by the Charles River, coat pulled tight against the late evening chill. He looked older, not from age but from weight. The weight of threats, of erasure, of memory. He didn't look up when she sat beside him. They know where you are, she said. He nodded. They're watching you. I know. She turned toward him. You didn't answer. I was afraid, he said. It was the first time she'd ever heard him say that. He rubbed his hands together slowly. Not of them. Not really. But of becoming something I promised myself I'd never be again. She didn't speak. He stared across the water. I've lived 30 years walking with silence. I used to think it protected me, kept me safe. But now I realize, it just kept me invisible long enough for someone else to wear my name. That night was the turning point. Raymond didn't go back into hiding. He walked into the fire. With Naomi's help and Dr. Leona Price's guidance, Raymond took his rage and channeled it into something bigger than himself. They formed a nonprofit, a foundation, a space. Its name was deliberate. Beyond You. The first grant came from a private donor who had quietly followed Raymond's story since the Harvard scandal. The second came from a black alum of MIT, who now ran a tech startup in Atlanta. By the end of the first month, they had secured enough seed funding to launch a natural mentorship and scholarship initiative for young black engineers and STEM students. Silenced by institutional bias,
Naomi became its communications director.
Dr. Price joined as program chair. Raymond didn't take a title. He just called himself a builder. They created programs for high school students, locked out of AP Science due to resource gaps. For college students discouraged from grad school by subtle academic gatekeeping. For professionals pushed out of labs or buried under false accusations like Raymond had once been. At the first virtual roundtable, a young woman from Detroit asked Raymond, "How do you know when it's time to stop being silent?" He replied, "When your silence starts protecting their comfort more than your truth." The room went quiet. That became their motto. Silence isn't neutral, it's camouflage for injustice. As the foundation grew, the headlines shifted again. The public began paying attention, not to Harvard, not to MIT, but to Raymond Keller's vision. Not as a victim, not as a prodigy, but as a maker of space. But justice has strange timing. Because just as Beyond You held its first regional summit in Chicago, a federal investigation moved swiftly and quietly. The evidence Naomi had traced to Elliot Vance, combined with the leak from the podcast producer and the intellectual theft documents, it formed the backbone of a cyber conspiracy case. Aldridge was arrested without cameras. The charge: orchestrating an academic sabotage and retaliation campaign via cyber proxies and false testimony. His mugshot spread across academic Twitter, like a reckoning long overdue. And for the first time, Raymond didn't feel like the one being watched. He felt like the one watching the storm pass. But the past still had claws. One afternoon, after delivering a keynote to a group of engineering students in DC, Raymond suffered a panic attack. Not the kind with visible collapse, but the kind that builds quietly. His throat tightened, ears rang, and the floor beneath him began to tilt. It happened when a student asked about MIT. The question was innocent, but the name was a wound. Naomi found him afterward, sitting on a bench behind the auditorium, his hands trembling. He looked at her. "I thought I was past it." "You are," she said. "But trauma doesn't care about that." Later that night, Dr. Price called. "You've carried the weight of two lives," she said. "The one they stole, and the one you built after. That fracture, it doesn't heal clean." Raymond didn't reply. But the next morning, an email arrived. Subject: the MIT Symposium. Invitation: Transformative Innovators of the 21st. The body was short. "Dear Mr. Keller, you are formally invited to return to MIT as an honorary speaker for our 50th anniversary symposium on engineering innovation. We recognize your profound contributions, past and present, and wish to honor your legacy. With deepest respect, Symposium Committee." He read the message 5 times. Then again, he closed the laptop without responding. For 3 days, he said nothing. Naomi didn't push him. On the 4th day, she knocked on his door and handed him a single envelope. No logo, no return address, just his name written in black ink. Inside was a handwritten letter. "You gave me back my voice. You made me believe it was okay to exist in this field again. If you go to MIT, you won't be going back alone. You'll be walking in with all of us. Jules, class of 2026. Electrical engineering." He folded the note and slipped it into his pocket. That night he replied to the invitation. "Yes, but I speak on my terms." Naomi was the first to find out. She smiled softly. "You ready to return to the scene of the crime?" Raymond shook his head. Not the crime. The cover-up. The MIT Symposium was scheduled for March, and Raymond wasn't coming back to relive history. He was coming to rewrite it. On the day before the event, a package arrived at Beyond You's Boston office. No name, no sender. Inside, a flash drive and a handwritten note. "There's something you never saw. It was buried before you could find it. Play the file." The air inside MIT's Kresge Auditorium was thick with anticipation. Not just the kind that came with academic conferences or innovation showcases, but the rare, soul-deep tension that precedes a reckoning. They called it the 50th Anniversary Symposium on Engineering Innovation, but everyone knew why the room was full. Raymond Keller had returned. 2 decades after his name had been whispered only in allegations, half erased from institutional memory, he now stood at the center of MIT's most celebrated stage. Naomi watched from the front row, fingers clasped tight. To her left sat Dr. Leona Price, elegant in a gray blazer, her eyes locked on the podium. The host had barely finished introducing him when the applause began. It wasn't thunderous. It was deliberate. A slow-building, spine-humming rhythm of affirmation. Raymond stepped into the light. No blazer, no slides, no digital props. Just a piece of chalk. The auditorium fell silent. Behind him stood a massive green chalkboard. Clean, empty, awaiting testimony. He didn't speak at first. He simply approached the board and began writing. Slow, deliberate strokes. Equations born not of showmanship, but of fluency. Each line a return. A resurrection. He wrote a new design challenge, one no one in the room had seen before. It had no known solution. It was a question of torque alignment in multi-vector electromagnetic systems. Layered, abstract, beautiful. And then he turned around. "I was told this stage wasn't for people like me," he said quietly. The mic carried his voice, but the silence carried the weight. "I was told my mind was dangerous, too confident, too vocal, too colored." His eyes swept the audience. "And when I was 19, my name was stripped from my own research. Not because I was wrong, but because someone else needed to be right more than they needed to be honest." A professor in the second row shifted uncomfortably. "But here's the thing," Raymond continued. "You can steal credit. You can silence voices. You can even burn the paper trail. But what you can't do is erase what someone knows how to build. Because knowledge, real knowledge, lives in the body like memory." He turned back to the board and kept solving.
As he worked, he narrated not just the math, but the moments.
This equation began on a table I mopped around. This proof was whispered into notebooks. I was told I didn't belong near. And this method was laughed at in labs that now teach it as standard. He paused halfway through the solution and looked up again. This isn't just a solution, it's a sentence. He wrote it on the board in chalk, beneath the final step. It was never beyond me. It was beneath you to assume it was. Gasps echoed around the room. Not of surprise, but of recognition. He had not only solved the problem, he had solved them. The applause didn't wait this time. It erupted before he stepped away from the board.
It wasn't polite. It wasn't academic.
It was thunder. Naomi stood, clapping hard, her eyes full. Leona beside her didn't clap. She simply wiped a tear from her cheek. The auditorium was on its feet, but Raymond didn't stay to bask in it. He stepped down from the stage quietly, like a man walking away from a grave he no longer needed to visit. Backstage, a woman in a navy suit approached him. "Mr. Keller?" Raymond nodded, a little dazed from the rush. She handed him an envelope, thick, cream-colored, embossed with the presidential seal. "This was sent under classified routing," she said. "Requested delivery upon conclusion of your lecture." Raymond opened it with cautious hands. Inside was a letter, signed by the White House Chief of Staff.
Mr. Keller,
"The Office of Science and Technology Policy has followed your work with great interest. The President himself watched your symposium speech live. We would like to invite you to join a classified engineering think tank initiative, tasked with shaping the future of national sustainable infrastructure. You were once silenced. We believe you are now one of the voices our country must hear." He blinked. There was no title for the project. Just a line at the bottom. "P.S. We've reviewed your early notebooks. Your theories may have relevance beyond domestic application." He folded the letter slowly. Naomi appeared behind him. "What was that?" Raymond looked up at her. "They want me to consult. National level. High security work." Her eyebrows lifted. "And?" He looked down at the chalk still dusted on his fingers. "I came here to reclaim the past." She tilted her head. "And now," he pocketed the letter, "now I get to invent the future." But just as they turned to leave the auditorium, another figure stepped into view. A younger man, mid-30s, dressed like faculty, carrying an envelope of his own. His badge read Ethan Vance, MIT Legal Affairs. He extended a hand, but his eyes were stormy. "I was told to deliver this to you directly," he said. "It's regarding newly unearthed archive materials tied to your work from Raymond tensed. "From where?" "The basement server." "Who accessed them?" Ethan hesitated. "It appears they were sealed by Carl Aldrich, under special faculty privileges." Raymond took the envelope and opened it. Inside were high-resolution scans of handwritten notes. His notes, marked and time-stamped, dated, verified. Pages from his lost thesis. But they weren't just notes. They contained prototypes for 2 inventions currently patented under Vance and Aldrich LLP, dating back almost 20 years. Naomi stepped closer, her breath catching. "This is proof," she whispered. "Legal, sealed, dated. They stole everything." Raymond didn't speak. His fingers curled slowly around the pages. As he stared at the documents, Ethan said quietly, "There's more. One of Aldrich's old hard drives was recovered, and it contains something personal about why he targeted you in the first place." Raymond met his gaze. "What did he say?" Ethan's voice dropped. "He didn't just see you as a threat. He wrote, 'Some people don't belong in the room, no matter how smart they are.'" Raymond stood on the balcony of the Beyond You Foundation's new headquarters, a restored 3-story brownstone in Roxbury, lined with solar panels and framed by murals of Black inventors and engineers. He had just declined the Presidential Medal of Technology, not out of spite, not even out of protest, but because he knew what the medal represented: a spotlight too late, cast by hands that once turned away. Instead, he redirected the attention, and the $5 million discretionary grant attached to it, into something real. The Beyond Labs Initiative, a free STEM training and mentorship program for Black youth in underserved communities. It wouldn't be symbolic. It would be transformational. And Raymond didn't want statues or speeches. He wanted scholarships, soldering kits, 3D printers and laptops in the hands of children told they couldn't. He wanted lab coats instead of handcuffs. He wanted equations instead of warnings. Inside the building, classrooms buzzed with life. Young students solving robotics challenges, college mentors helping draft scholarship essays, volunteers rewriting what access looked like. Naomi walked in, holding a folder of new applicants. Her voice was light, but her expression was serious. 3 cities have asked us to expand: Baltimore, Oakland, and St. Louis. Raymond took the folder. What's the barrier? Space and staffing. We'll need about 20 engineers, 5 full-time coordinators, and at least $800,000 in funding. He nodded. We'll find it. Naomi tilted her head. You don't even blink anymore. I've stopped asking if the world will open the door, he said. Now I just build my own. She smiled. By the end of the quarter, Beyond You had expanded into 5 cities. The demand kept growing. Tech companies offered sponsorships. High schools restructured their curricula to integrate the foundation's tools. Alumni of the program were now enrolling in top-tier engineering schools, some on full rides. But Raymond remained behind the curtain.
No press interviews.
No campus tours. Only the work. And in that work, his legacy lived, not as a rebuttal to Carl Aldrich, not even as redemption for MIT, but as revolution against the quiet racism that hid in gatekeeping, in not the right fit, in maybe next time. Dr. Leona Price now sat on advisory boards for 3 Ivy League universities, pushing reforms to how academic integrity cases were handled, especially those rooted in racial bias. Her own confession, recorded during Raymond's tribunal, became a cornerstone case study in administrative law. Naomi, meanwhile, had become a national voice speaking on panels, writing op-eds, developing AI tools that tracked systemic bias in educational materials. TED Talks, awards, recognition. But still, she always returned to Boston. This, she'd say every time she stepped into the lab, is the only podium I care about. Then, one day, a letter arrived. Not from MIT, not from Harvard, from Yale. It was simple. To the Beyond You team. Our department is reevaluating internal policies regarding academic equity and mentorship. We would be honored if Mr. Keller or a representative could visit our campus to speak with faculty and students. Raymond looked at the envelope for a long time. Naomi asked, "Going?" He didn't answer. But a week later, he did something unexpected. He donated a full grant package to Yale's incoming freshman class, specifically earmarked for low-income Black students entering STEM majors. He included a note: "You don't need to become someone else to belong. Make the board your own." RK. It made its way around social media, sparking a new wave of discourse about equity in elite education. Back in Boston, Raymond kept to his schedule. Early lab hours, mentoring, late nights drafting new materials. One evening, after a long day of reviewing internship placements, he pulled out the same chalk he once held on Harvard's board. He began drawing a new equation. Nothing practical, nothing for patent, just pure thought. It was art now. The board filled with complex loops of theoretical mechanics, curves so precise they formed visual harmony. Behind him, Naomi watched silently. "You ever going to write the book?" she asked. He didn't stop moving the chalk. "No," he said. "Why not?" He turned to her. "Because I'm not the story." She frowned. "Then what is?" He looked at the board, full of looping logic and impossible dreams. "This," he said, "is the story. A mind that wasn't meant to survive here, but did." That same week, headlines broke. Aldrich pleads guilty to data theft. Faces disbarment. MIT overhauls ethics policy after Raymond Keller case. Harvard appoints first equity ombudsman for STEM departments. But Raymond never commented. He had no interest in watching them scramble to revise their legacies. His was already etched in chalk. It was in the free textbooks co-authored with Naomi, now used in 2,000 public schools. It was in the lab coat of a 16-year-old girl from Newark, who built her own circuit board. It was in the scholarship acceptance letter of a boy whose older brother had once been expelled for disruption, when all he did was ask too many questions in physics class. It was in the fire Raymond refused to extinguish. And in the silence, he never allowed again. His final act of the year was quiet. He funded a rural STEM school in Mississippi, where his grandmother once picked cotton. They named the building the Raymond Keller Innovation Hall. No plaque, just the name on the door, and a lab full of young minds finally given the tools to rise. But this story didn't end in Boston. Because while Raymond was reviewing student progress reports one afternoon, Naomi received an email that made her freeze. She clicked the attached video and played it. The footage was shaky, recorded on a cell phone. A dim hallway, a door marked Yale Engineering Department, Lab 4B.
In the corner of the video, a janitor, young, black, in standard blue uniform, stood before a chalkboard.
He held a piece of chalk in one hand, a trash bag in the other. The board bore a half-solved equation left behind by a professor. The janitor stared at it. Then, slowly, carefully, put the bag down. He picked up the chalk and started to solve. The last frame zoomed in on his hand as it traced a perfect arc through the final equation. A girl's voice off-camera whispered, "Wait, is he solving that?" Cut to black. Some names never make it to the history books. Not because they weren't brilliant, but because someone made sure they stayed invisible. If Raymond's story moved you, if you've ever seen someone silenced for who they are, not what they know, type yes. If you believe in justice,